Hello and welcome, I'm Oliver Duke and you're watching Head to Head on UATV. Will the war in Donbas turn into a frozen conflict, or could diplomacy and international organizations contribute to restoring peace? And if so, how? To highlight this topic, we're joined in the studio today by Volodymyr Khandogiy. He is an experienced diplomat and president of the Ukrainian Foreign Policy Association. Hello and thank you for being with us today.
Good afternoon.
So, Mr. Khandogiy, I want to quote you. You said, if the conflict cannot be solved, it should be extended. What do you mean by that?
I would rather say it should be expanded.
Expanded.
Expanded, and that's what I meant. I meant in terms of the participants of the countries that try to resolve the conflict. Today we are having a so-called Normandy format, which consists of only 4 countries. And those countries are trying desperately for the last 4 years to resolve this conflict with no avail. So in my opinion, and this is not only my opinion, this is the theory and practice of the conflict resolutions, that you need to expand the participants of the conflict, of the countries that try to resolve it. Let's say in other conflicts like Middle East or in Africa and in Latin America, there were so many countries that were participants, that were the parties to the resolution, not the parties to the conflict, but the members of different formats, different groups that were trying to be involved. And
what countries do you see in restoring peace
in the first
Ukraine?
place, I would like, I meant, and I would like to see United Nations to be more involved in not only at the very end, we are talking about the peacekeeping operation, about blue helmets, so on, but we are not talking about the direct involvement of the United Nations in the resolution of the conflict. This is one part. And the other side of the coin, we might think about involving directly the signatories of the Budapest Memorandum. And I said that on several occasions, that it's very strange that those countries that gave Ukraine guarantees, somebody says assurances,
well, Russia was among that
but they are not taking part.
Yes.
The United States are playing a part in the resolution, but somewhere on the side, on the margins. One of the signatories, Russia, is the violator of the Budapest Memorandum. So it is.
Yeah, but they deny this by saying that they are not using nuclear power, so no nuclear.
If somebody says like that, that person didn't read the Budapest Memorandum. Budapest Memorandum is not about the using of the nuclear weapons. It's about the preserving and guaranteeing Ukraine's sovereignty and not letting nobody to use force or the threat of use of force. And that was in return when Ukraine in 1994, the early 90s, removed all the nuclear weapons from its territory, and in turn, the most we could obtain at that point in time, is that this piece of paper, which is really a very important piece of paper, this is international, legally binding instrument.
Yeah, but coming back to our topic, what do you see as the main obstacle for United Nations to fully join the process of restoring peace in Donbas?
Well, the reason is twofold. First of all, I think it's my personal opinion, but I expressed it on several occasions, that it's a lack of understanding on the part of Ukraine, the importance of the involvement of the United Nations into the peace process, in anticipation that Russia, as the permanent member of the Security Council, will veto all Ukraine's steps or resolution directed towards the implementation, towards the resolution of the conflict. But even in these circumstances, when Russia is the permanent member and so on and so forth, we have to be more active in at least putting the issue on the agenda of the Security Council, of the General Assembly. There are so many leverages that the United Nations have in terms, and such a vast experience that the United Nations has in terms of resolution of the different kinds of conflicts, that it's absolutely impossible not to involve it. Plus, like I said, we are talking about these peacekeeping operations. But this is the very end of the process. Before United Nations is not a fire brigade or the ambulance that you pick up a phone, call peacekeepers and please do something.
Yeah.
In order to have that, United Nations has to be involved in the diplomatic negotiating process.
Do you believe that peacekeeping mission is going to happen in Donbas?
I believe, actually, I am an optimist, and I think this is a very relevant and very correct track. And this is the step towards what I was saying, towards more direct involvement of the United Nations on a larger scale. Because if at some point in time, it will not be done immediately. It will be a long process, but I'm pretty much hopeful.
What is your vision of the proper way for this mission to happen?
Well, there is the only way. It should be a decision of the Security Council. Yeah, but period.
Whom does this mission should consist of, and how many people should
That's a technicalities. In the first place, you need to obtain consensus in principle. Then you have to obtain consensus regarding the mandate, what should be done by this operation, and then the composition. Of course, there is a tradition in the United Nations that countries that are vaguely involved or directly involved should not participate in any kind of the peacekeeping operation. The composition should be acceptable to the country on territory of which this operation is deployed.
And what about the neighboring countries? For example, Belarus, because the Belarusian
I'm
minister...
not ready to talk about concrete countries. Like I said, the composition should be very objective. It should consist of countries that are not, doesn't have any direct relations to the conflict. Belarus, as the member of the union state with Russia, definitely, by definition, is the interested party. I cannot imagine Belarus pursuing independent foreign policy without any regard to the position of Moscow. So I doubt, and I would be personally against the participation of Belarus. There are so many countries in the world. There is a pool of countries, and the United Nations has a roster, a kind of list of countries already ready to provide personnel, like we know very well the Finland, Sweden, some even Asian countries that are professionals. They are professional peacekeepers. So that should be probably a pool from where we will take, or the United Nations will take, invite countries to be part of the mission.
Well, except for the peacekeeping mission, what tools and mechanism for Donbas does UN have so far?
There is Article 6, or rather Chapter 6 of the United Nations Charter, which is a pretty long chapter describing all necessary tools, ways and means of peaceful settlement of disputes. I would like to mention only one, and that is the Secretary General, which himself, as the Chief Executive Officer, but not only, he is also a political figure within the United Nations, and he has pretty important authorities in pursuing his own policy towards the resolution. We need to approach the Secretary General more directly and more actively in order that he will provide his good offices, his negotiating capacities. He may send a representative. Secretary General of the United Nations has quite a number of different personal representatives in all parts, in various parts of the world where the conflicts are undergoing. So in this context, we also can use his good offices and his abilities to try to assist in resolution of this conflict.
But you say that Russia will veto this resolution.
No, we are talking not about the resolution. What I was saying is that the Secretary General,
will give his support.
by the virtue of his position, he has his own prerogatives and he can act. It depends on his political will, on his readiness to act sometimes even against the will of certain permanent members. And this is a very difficult situation. We know from the history number of Secretary Generals acting in different ways. We can recollect in our memories Dag Hammarskjöld, famous Secretary General that was acting on his own in certain conflict situations without the consent of the Security Council.
Well, but how could we get this support? Does this depend on our diplomatic work with the UN headquarters?
Yes, we have to work very actively, and we have to try to be not the object of the negotiations, but the subject. We have to participate directly in every kind of the possible formats that could be imagined. For instance, we all know that Kurt Volker, the American special representative, is doing a so-called shuttle diplomacy between Moscow and Washington, and he and Surkov are trying to negotiate something. We are told that Ukraine is being informed about what is going on, but in my opinion, Ukraine should be part of those negotiations.
Sure.
Russia produced and tabled a resolution in the Security Council, and you know, some months ago, I think in September last year, where she outlined her vision of the peacekeeping operation, which is not acceptable to us. We haven't heard of about the resolution which was tabled by Ukraine, and I don't know why. We sort of give up, and we sort of gave the lead to the Americans, which is good. I mean, Americans must be involved. It's a very important state, maybe the most important state in the world. But I don't think we should stay so far on the margins of the process.
So basically this, what you're saying, that Ukrainian government is not fully involved in this conversation, in the dialogue.
Well, I don't want to blame the Ukrainian government. I think the Ukrainian diplomacy should be more active and should produce initiatives, should speak up more loudly in various fora in the United Nations, in the Security Council. We've just terminated our term in the Security Council, 2 years term, and I remember not too many actually speeches by Ukraine in the Security Council on this issue. Maybe I don't know something, and there is something is boiling, and this is the strategies that was chosen by the authorities in Ukraine. But my personal opinion and experience always tell me that you should be in the forefront, since you are the object. I mean, the how you call it? The aggression was against Ukraine, so it gives us a right to be more active in this, and we have to do that.
Speaking about Ukrainian diplomacy, I know that just recently you have published a book about it.
Oh yeah.
Would you like to present us a bit?
You know, quite incidentally, this book is in this studio, and this is really, I did publish it, not me, but the publishing house Summit Book published this volume. It is called Diplomatic Plots. Diplomatic plots, I don't know, in Ukraine it's diplomatic sujet diplomatique in French.
In French.
And true stories of the career diplomat. This book covers a period basically covered the period of the Ukrainian SSR as the member of the United Nations, but it also contains a lot of links with the current situation, and I'm trying to fill up a gap in the institutional memory that was created recently, and I'm trying to say that Ukraine has a vast experience in the multilateral diplomacy, and that experience should not be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Who should be the readers of this book? Is this specifically for the diplomats, or is it for common use?
Well, first of all, yes, it should be the target audience, of course, as those who are interested in the foreign relations.
So it showcases the real stories of the actual diplomacy.
Yeah, I count quite a lot on the young generation, because I'm trying, for instance, to explain what is diplomacy, and how to become a diplomat from my own experience, my years in the university, how we were studying English, other foreign languages, history, and all that. So I think, but I'm sure it should be interesting for the wide audience as well.
Well, let's hope for that, and thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
That was Volodymyr Khandogiy, President of Ukrainian Foreign Policy Association. Thank you for watching Head to Head, and stay with UATV.